I am Mary Bacon. I have been asked, and I'm honored, to do a master conversation, let's call it, about acting for primary stages. A place that I have had the honor and pleasure of doing several shows, and I'm so happy they're going back to the space that I got to do some of the most thrilling performances in my life as an actor. 59 East 59 next year. So that's so exciting. I recently, as of last Thursday, was performing in Coal Country at the Public Theater here in New York City. And I thought that I would use this opportunity to talk about what it's like to act in a documentary theater piece, because it has been so different from my work as from working on a new play where you're playing a character. So I very recently, just last Thursday, was part of one of the most incredible experiences of my time as an actor. A long time ago, I went to see a documentary theater piece called The Exonerated, off-Broadway. Now, one of the creators of this piece was Eric Jensen, who was ahead of me in drama school at Carnegie Mellon. I think I did 2 plays with him. One was like an official school play in which I played a prostitute in Brendan Behan's The Hostage. And the other was in a play that we worked on together that one of the grad playwrights wrote. And Eric was always an enigma to me. He was driven, he was kind, he would be generous with his advice, which I rarely took as a young actor. So Eric and his partner at that time, Jessica Blank, they have since gotten married and have a child. But this is their very first project that they did together, where they decided to go interview people who had been exonerated from death sentences on death row. And they put all of their interviews together using everyone's exact words. They didn't change a word. And they put it together in a piece called The Exonerated. And it was electrifying. And I mean, people were just at music stands. They would interchange the casts. They even had some of the people who play themselves as it ran for over 2 years. 2 or 3, I could be wrong, and it's probably been done all over the place. But I had never seen anything like that before. I loved Anna Devere Smith. I loved this kind of work, but I just was astounded that they did that. Then they did another one called Aftermath, where they interviewed Iraqi refugees in Jordan. And it was equally affecting, amazing, beautiful. And so when I got a call that they had gone down to research, that they had gone down to West Virginia, where there had been this massive explosion, one of the deadliest coal mine explosions in recent history in 2010, April 5th, 2010, and interviewed the survivors. Now, the public had signed on and funded their exploration, which was a whole story in itself, and you can read some of the articles in the New York Times about this. This is all, very recent stuff that's just come out. And then also Steve Earle, who also was involved with the Exonerated, signed on to go write music for it. But I didn't know any of this at the time. I just got a phone call saying, hey, do you want to do a workshop of the Upper Big, as yet untitled Upper Big Branch Mine project that Eric Jensen and Jessica Blank are doing at the Public Theater? And I was like, yeah, I think that sounds like I'd be interested in something like that. So I went down, and it was so affecting the very first time we read it. And this is like mountains of documentary footage that they had, transcripts of their interviews, that in the very first read through, someone had to get up and leave the room they were so overcome. But it was massive amounts of material, and how to put this into a show that could be digested and understood and significant and dramatic. So I was like, this is going to be, I get to have a front row seat to at least part of that process. And then they called me again for the second workshop that I was aware of. There might have been more. And then they called me again for the third one. And I had some movie that I had to shoot for one day. It was on the day of the presentation. And I was heartbroken. And that happened to be the presentation that they were going to be doing for with Steve Earle's music. Steve Earle's album is coming out in May. It's called Ghosts of West Virginia. And it's about the same thing. And he has several more songs that were not in the production that I've recently been performing in. Anyway, that's just to say it's a long process, and it's to get something to the stage. But documentary theater in particular has a number of different issues. I can't speak to all of that. I could, but I'd be assuming things. But I don't want to speak to all of that because Jessica and Eric have plenty of footage on them where you can read about them. There is an article they just did, an interview they just did, I think a couple days ago for American Theater Magazine about their work. And there's, as I said, there's several articles out about that, some interviews, NPR interviews on the radio, etc. How that applies to me. So I get the call asking if I would be available to do this show and if I was comfortable singing a song alone on stage. This is another interesting thing to me, is that I have always sung. I've always taken lessons. I took it all through Carnegie Mellon, but I never felt that I could compete with the musical theater powerhouses as I had observed. So I didn't want to waste my time there, but I loved singing. Then my first musical audition was for the public a few years ago for the musical Giant by Michael John LaCusa and Sybil Pearson, directed by Michael Greif. And once I had that audition, I started to sing very regularly with the most wonderful voice teacher in the world, Mark Planner, who told me that there would be an opportunity one day for the right thing to come along that would suit my voice, that would suit my acting, all in one. And I was like, yeah, right. So when Jessica called me, and she said, we were thinking of going with like a real professional singer, but Steve Earle told us to cast whoever we want. So I was like, this is insane. But it's good to be prepared. Sometimes I think it doesn't even need to be that you beg your higher power every day to provide the opportunity. The opportunity will come. It will come. So I started working on this play, and I had done like Laramie Project, not the original, but I had worked on it, so I understood documentary theater. But this was different. This was knowing the people, knowing the event, knowing every single thing about it and how it affected their lives. This was working with the creators who were talking to those people all the time. This was bigger than anything I'd ever done. This was just being in the room where it happens, I guess is how you can look at it. And it was with extraordinary actors. So my first impression when we started working on it was like, how's this gonna work? How is this gonna be compelling just to have people talk about events that have already happened? It's in the past. How do you make that present? How does that work? theater drama is all about the present moment and having the present be affected even by like an audience member's reaction, or you know, that it's different every night. How is this going to work narratively and acting wise? I didn't know, and I had those questions at the beginning. And how is it going to be like where I'm just acting by myself? Is it going to be like acting by myself all the time? Like, your turn, now your turn, like a monologue class? I mean, talk about like the energy dropping in between each person. I was so worried about that. Now, I didn't know enough to know specifically how Eric and Jessica work in terms of putting this thing together. And then this special element of Steve Earle in the room playing the music that would automatically put us in the present as the characters would say where they are at the beginning of the disaster, when it happened, how it was like to go through it, what happened after, and where they are now. Because that's what it is. And how affecting that would be for us, but for an audience as well. I started to get a hint at the first read through where we could barely get through it. And also where you would feel so good after, connecting to those feelings that those characters are going through. But I still had my doubts. What was different about working on that? A play has the same writer writing the voices of all the characters. And you can see that. Every play has its own tone, its own rhythm that the playwright intentionally has set. And then the playwright's job is to find a director who is going to understand that tone and then be able to communicate that to the actors and then bring all of the actors in the room to the same understanding and have it work on them in the same way. What was different about this is we were playing 8 different people who don't all feel the same, who also don't talk the same. They don't have the same rhythms. And we didn't have, they very intentionally did not tell us. They didn't like give us videos of each person and say, just imitate them. They asked us actually not to do that. And I was like, okay, I'm being asked to, like, sometimes I don't understand why she cuts herself off there. I'm not sure why. I can guess, but I'm not sure why. And I guess this piece is so close to me right now, but I saw it just grow. I saw people just kind of in the middle of rehearsal discover why their character was saying this at this particular moment. We also had to work on dialects, which is quite thick, West Virginia. And West Virginia is quite isolated from the rest of the country. And they know it, for a number of reasons. A lot of West Virginians don't leave West Virginia. And they are used to being dismissed wherever they are when they tell people where they're from. Which was also the intent of this piece, was to say, don't dismiss these people. They're just like you. And that's the wonderful thing about acting. I mean, really, that's why I started doing it, was my love for humanity, and for having a place to do that. I mean, once I discovered that every feeling, and I was told by a teacher, every feeling that any person has, you are capable of having just by being human. You don't have to do anything extra for that. You just have that capability. And I want you all to know that as well. So there was that, learning the accents. And then sometimes it was like with learning the dialect, there would be a way of saying something, like my character would say something in a certain way. I can just hear him saying this, like I was instructed to rush over that because they would just make that an aside that was really fast. And I so didn't want to rush over that. I wanted to point it out, underline it. And I had to start just letting the external circumstances of the character work on me, such as how they speak. So that was challenging. It was really challenging, especially when, you're just trying to figure out where this is coming from, trying to figure out who I'm talking to. And we were all very worried about that initially in rehearsal. Who are we talking to? Where do we look? And it just worked itself out. The characters in that play, the people who were interviewed, I keep saying characters, but they're real people. The real people talked to Eric and Jessica because they wanted to tell their stories. So we knew that. And they knew that the people they were talking to wanted them to tell their stories, were interested. So that was like something like, oh, everyone who's come to this theater tonight is interested. I don't have to convince them that my story is interesting. They are here because they're interested in my story. And I just have to take that like interest and embrace it. Like, I'm going to tell you because I know you want to hear it. You seem like you really want to hear it. And Jessica and Eric really did want to hear it. And they were interviewing people who nobody wanted to hear from. No one. The trial ended where the guy responsible for all these deaths and this complete, as one of the characters says, I think the circle broke. Like, he broke a community, broke it down, and took no responsibility. And did not get he got 1 year of jail time because that was the maximum he could be allowed to get. And then they were forgotten, and they certainly didn't expect anyone in the country to like seek them out. So this was a special project. And I guess, what else do I want to say about acting in a documentary piece? Not working so hard to be a character. Don't know if that makes any sense. But a lot of times I know when I first started out acting, I thought I would read a breakdown, let's say. The character is this, this, this. I'm like, well, I'm none of those things, so I have to make myself be those things before I will be. Now, a lot of times, those are just descriptive words that may or may not suit you, but if it makes you feel like you don't belong, then just cross that word out. There's all kinds of people who got roles that were not supposed to be for any one of their description. But what every single character has is humanity. If we strip away all of our outward signifiers, our hair color, the color of our skin, the way we sound, the mannerisms we have, our background, our class, what class we come from, all of these outward signifiers, and we just get down to what's elemental, which is humanity's desire for safety, love, connection, a space to grieve, comfort, desire for meaning, and to be seen. Well, all of us have that. And this is all to like inspire you to do it yourself, if you're looking for a new monologue or just looking for inspiration, go interview somebody. Then you like take it apart, edit it, and play that person. It's fantastic theater. It's incredible. It's incredible to watch. It's been incredible for people to see it. It's told me and all of my castmates how none of those things, and the audiences, some people have expressed to me that they expected it to be like not that interesting either, to hear people just get up and talk about past events. But it's like, it's so gripping. It's kind of like, I'm a very big listener to the Moth podcasts, and I absolutely adore people just telling their stories. This is just real storytelling. And when you are retelling something, as a lot of monologues in plays, there will be like you'll come across your character has to talk about something that happened. What happens is, as we tell what happened to us, we start to relive it in the telling. And so there's a present moment to it that you don't have to worry about. It's just there. That has been really interesting to discover. It's been interesting to discover how every night I would start out at one place and feel completely differently. Every character in that play has an emotional arc where they are changed by the end of it. And I think that's why it was such a successful production, is that the audience starts out one place and ends at a different place at the end of it. And they're glad that they experienced it. They are grateful, they are thankful, which was entirely what Jessica Blank and Eric Jensen wanted them to experience. We're praying it comes back. We have no idea in which way, how. Nobody knows anything at this point, but we know that it was incredible. We were cut short in our run. It wasn't just being cut short. We had just opened the week before to glorious reviews that were basically like, everyone go see this. And then we had to stop. And, that's been the fate of a lot of shows. But we are, not me personally, because, my job is I'm an actor in it, but the creators and the theater and everybody involved is trying to figure out what's the next step when there is no next step for anybody right now. Knowing that we're all together in that, not just in my cast, but in my theater family, my showbiz family, all of the artist family that we're in, where we are so used to a certain degree of uncertainty by virtue of doing this in the first place it's hard to even say career. It's more like it's a vocation, because it's bigger than that, right? It's not just a job. There's plenty of jobs that we have in the theater or in TV or whatever that do feel like a job, but ultimately the whole entire experience of it is bigger than just a job. Just a job is something you maybe you do it and you're doing it because you have to, and you can leave it and go home and then pick it up the next day. But to do a job that you really want to do, that doesn't feel like work, because this has never felt like work to me. It's always felt like play, even though I absolutely need to be paid. I absolutely need to make a living, but it's also play, and that's why all of you are watching this in the first place. I know. You probably got more hands holding you up than you realize at any given moment in the day. Treat people nicely, whoever you work with. Treat your colleagues, treat your classmates. You're going to be working with them for the rest of your life. I wish someone had told me that when I was young, rather than, one of us has to get, jockeying for position, for attention. Pay attention to who's around you at all times and treat everyone like they matter. They matter, they matter, they matter just as much as you do. There's no hierarchy of importance. That's another little thing I can impart to you. I heard a while ago, which was really useful to me, Olympia Dukakis said, the reason you become an actor is not why you stay an actor. I think that's true. I think that your reasons for staying and keeping doing it change over time. I think also that the commitment to do it in the first place, if it's not reliant upon people liking you, or reliant upon being chosen for this role or that role, or but just your commitment to figure it out no matter what, then you've already made that commitment internally, and all of the how will appear. It will come. It will come. Build it. It will come. You got to build that in yourself. Nobody can give that to you. You're the only person who can give that to you. And I look back at myself and I go, oh my God, when I got out of drama school, I didn't have any agents knocking on the door. We had agent presentations. This is a funny story. I didn't have any of that. When I first got out of drama school, no one agreed to meet with me. I can't remember. I think it was I had 2 people interested. And I had a lot of classmates who had every single person wanted to meet with them, Some got jobs right out of just even the league's presentations. I went home and I said, okay, got some books out of the library, and I said, okay, I guess I'll just be non-equity for 5 years. I didn't know what I was talking about. It didn't matter. What I was doing was I was giving myself the space to, I was giving myself a time limit for being able to figure it out. And then I stopped worrying about it, I think my first job was in TheaterWorks, which is, I highly recommend. All the people working at TheaterWorks were all of these amazing composers and directors. I was directed by David Beach, who's this fantastic actor. He was in, he's been in, he did this wonderful play for primary stages. He's worked on Broadway. He's a friend of mine. We had so much fun, and that gave me my equity card. You know, I played all the women in young Abe Lincoln's life. I played his mother, his girlfriend, Anne Rutledge. And then I ended up playing, who else did I play in that play? And then I ended up playing Mary Todd Lincoln several years ago at the Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C., in a play about her. It's such a crazy career. The things you get to do, I'm so excited for you. But my point is that I didn't go, oh, okay, so-and-so doesn't like me, you know. I'd already invested all of this time, but I'd already gotten encouragement that I was good. So I didn't have to, like, you just don't worry too much about those who say no, you know. It's just no there, you know. If you make that commitment inside to, as my mom used to say, go out and get your 50 no's. You know, I don't actually think I've ever gotten 50 no's in between gigs, you know, if I really think about it. I played Joan of Arc when I was really young, maybe too young. But there's the play Ennuy's, Jean Ennuy's The Lark. There's a lot of plays about Joan of Arc, but he wrote The Lark, which is about Joan of Arc. And in it, the Dauphin is hiding in his little palace, and Joan comes to him and she wants him to, you know, put his French army with her so that they can go fight the British. And he says, I'm afraid. She's like, let's go. Why don't you want to fight? And he goes, I'm afraid. And she goes, well, only the stupid are not afraid. You're afraid and you keep going anyway. I mean, that's just to say that don't be worried if fear is with you. I think fear is with you all the time. Fear is what makes opening night so incredible. Fear is what makes doing the audition anyway incredible. Fear is your friend. It tells you that you care. So don't worry about being afraid. Just don't worry about it. That's not a signifier. It's not a fact. It doesn't mean anything. You know, you can exercise caution, you know. I don't say don't follow your fear, keeping you from, you know, obeying all the rules for the coronavirus right now. No. You know, that's factual as well. But I'm just talking about this fear of pursuing what you want to do and thinking that you have to be reliant on what other people think of you in order to succeed. It's much more about what you think of you. And even if you don't have a high estimation of yourself, don't even worry about that, because you only need a tiny, tiny, tiny little bit of faith to keep going ultimately, I have discovered.